What does it truly mean to be a wizard in the modern world? Is magic just about spells and potions, or could it be something deeper, something that shapes the way we mentor, guide, and awaken the potential in others? Imagine a world where young people embark on their own hero's journey, learning the virtues of chivalry, honor, and resilience, guided by someone who walks beside them like the wise mentors of legend. What if becoming a hero wasn't just something that happened in books and movies, but a real path, one shaped through mentorship, challenges, and self-discovery? Today, we're joined by mentor Rick, who considers himself a professional wizard and dedicates his life to awakening the hero within young people. Through his Pathfinder program at Mana Academy, Rick helps young adventurers build confidence, resilience, and a sense of purpose using live role-playing mentorship, immersive quests, and practical life skills. Join us as we step into the world of modern wizardry, mentorship, and the true magic that lies in helping others unlock their potential. Welcome to the Magical Professions Podcast. Thank you very much, Mentor Rick, for joining us. It's great to have you on our podcast today. Can you please introduce yourself and let our listeners know where you are joining us from what part of the world? Thank you.
Thank you for having me on your wonderful podcast. I love being a guest on these things and a chance to talk about what I do in the world. I always relish the opportunity and honored to be invited as well. So yes, I am Rick, or better known in my area as Mentor Rick, and I am from Australia in a little corner called the Mornington Peninsula, which is in Victoria. Mm-hmm. And we are surrounded by lots of magical places. You can walk in one direction and find forests and rainforests and walking trails and hiking spots and big plains and fields, and then you can walk in the other direction and find the ocean and the foreshores and back beaches and farmland and all sorts of stuff. And I like being away from the big cities because I find that as much as it's probably more needed in big cities, I find that it's very lacking in magic. So get me back in nature and I'm happy.
Yes, absolutely. And this is where all magic lives. I think nature is number one place to look for it. And what would be one place that you would say everyone needs to see if they happen to come to Mornington Peninsula, to your place? What would that be?
Yeah. Well, we are very known for our lovely beaches. We've got a variety of them. We have big sort of front beaches, which are the best for swimming, and they stretch all along our coastline, and thousands and thousands and thousands of people come here over summer, and our sleepy little town that is, very quiet for most of the year turns very chaotic and it gets bigger every year, so that our beaches are completely full in summer. So, I would say that come and enjoy our beaches, but I'm more of a bit of a hiker. We're also known for our wonderful parks and recreational nature reserves and just beautiful, beautiful places like that. It's hard to put a finger on any one point, but I would say we are known for our beaches.
Thank you. We know already where to go when we visit your place. You call yourself a professional wizard. Can you share what that means to you?
Yeah, so I do call myself a wizard when I'm working with adolescents. The wizard archetype tends to evoke some wonder and magic And for example, when I worked with a class of young, I think they were about 11 years old last year, and I came into the school to run our Pathfinder program, which is all about teaching virtues and archetypes and chivalry and what makes up a good round table of allies and how to develop your own code. None of the young people knew what those things were. So a part of me was shocked and a part of me wasn't all that surprised because it's very lacking in our world. I think there's lots of lights and sounds and magical images, but I think it's all very surface level. So to bring wonder into the lives of these young people, I enter the environment and I have my wizard hat, and it's very authentic and custom made by a hat maker here in Australia. None of it's prop, none of it's costume. I have my backpack and it's kind of reminiscent of when Gandalf the wizard rolls into the Shire in his wagon. I'd love to have a wagon someday myself. I think it would be great. But that they come in and they see this tall man in a hat and a long coat, depending on the weather. It gets very hot here in summer, so I can't really wear a coat. So I try these mentorship programs in winter, but it doesn't always work out that way. And then I do there's a bit of theatrics there. It's not street magic, but I rummage in my bag for the materials that we'll be using in the class. And then in that process, I pull out leather scroll cases and gemstones and goblets and magic wands, and just to sort of gauge a reaction and see all the young people all wide-eyed. But this only works for these young people. When you start working with teenagers, especially in sort of where we live, a lot of that wonder I'm not going to say it's gone, but a lot of that wonder has been squashed down and compacted and compartmentalized and hidden from themselves. And my job then is to still be the wizard, still be the one that ekes that genius or that magic out of the young people, but you've got to switch it up. And that's the positive or cool function of archetypes, is being able to shapeshift, which I think is a pretty wizardly spell, to be able to shapeshift to your environment and put on a different hat. Well, in saying that, I take this hat off, and I take a bit more of that mentor role that you mentioned earlier. So I see that the role of the wizard and the role of the mentor are quite synonymous and interchangeable, that both evoke different emotions, both different languages, and they require different approaches as well. So I become a bit of a master of two worlds. I've got one foot in that wizardry role and one foot in the mentorship world.
Can you tell our listeners about your Pathfinder program? What is it, and what is this Mana Academy that you have established? So we want to know everything about you and what you do.
Of course, yeah. So our Pathfinder program is a core mentorship program, and these days I call it life role-playing game system, because in recent years I've gamified everything, and I'll talk about gamification a bit later on. But for our Pathfinder program, there's two versions of it, just like I mentioned before, for the younger people in primary school age, and for the teenagers and young adults that are in sort of that more secondary age or just leaving school and heading out into their journey of life. So for our young people, as I mentioned, it's a lot more lighter in theme. It has to evoke that magic, and I do that through my visuals. None of it is digital. I love being able to provide a wonderful looking program on paper that can immerse them in their learning. As much as, as an adult, I use digital platforms myself, but I feel for the young people that it doesn't help you retain your knowledge. I think if you're typing and recording things digitally or searching for answers online, it severely impacts your knowledge retention. So that makes me want to put all of my magic and my creative energy into creating these wonderful immersive programs while maintaining that, I guess you could call it old school technology, which is pen and paper writing or putting a pen to paper. There's even magic in that. It's kind of like alchemy. You're transmuting one material into another. You're transmuting your thoughts and your reflections and your stories and your ideas onto paper. And I think there's a lot of stock in that. So it takes on that theme of knights and wizards and forming a round table and learning about chivalry and honor and virtues and value and how to put all of that into a code so that it can help you become an authentic person when this world demands that we remain unauthentic. That's when a lot of people, especially young people, lose their way. They get pulled into peer pressure situations. They get pulled into gangs as well, which is a big problem we have here in Australia as well. And a lot of that has to do with not having a purpose, not having a code, and not having positive role models in our lives or in our communities so that when we face a crisis and we reach out, we should be able to find someone that can support us or walk beside us on that leg of the journey. For the teenagers, this is a very real reality for them. A lot of that magic has been removed, as I said before. A lot of them are facing more existential questions. They're asking, who am I? What role do I play within my family, within my community, within the world? And what is my purpose? What do I want to do in my life? So we take a bit more of a mature theme with the Pathfinder program here. You know, as I said, I step into that role of the mentor, and they need a serious role model. Most of them don't want to hear about magic. They want to hear about how I can help them or how I can help them help themselves more so to find their version of magic as an adult, which is having a purpose. It takes a bit more of like a video game theme. It takes a bit more of like a neo-militaristic academia theme. And this is where Manor Academy comes in as well. Most of the content is the same between the two programs. It's just done in a different way. So, you know, in the juniors, we talk about the round table to talk about our allies and our adversaries and who in our life can benefit us and how we can benefit them. With the teenager program, it's more about finding these links between our social connections and how we can see every opportunity or person in our life. Because once we start to recognize our own abilities, our own skills, our own challenges and limitations, we're able to notice that in everyone around us. So there's one major common thread between all of our programs, though, and that is mentorship. So we have all these flashy programs, and they look amazing, and they're, what I call our curriculum for heroes, but it can all take a back seat and be stripped back to the core of mentorship, and that is building a rapport and a connection with someone in their community that they can come to for advice and they can come to when they're feeling like they're a bit lost in the darkness. The mentor is the light that shines in that darkness and guides the way so that they're able to find their own feet and walk on their own path. And that leads into Manor Academy. So our Manor Academy has only just come about within the last year and a half. I wanted what we were doing in our Pathfinder program to kind of be extended. So once they find out who they are, their skills, their abilities, and how to apply that in finding a focus or a purpose in life, the problem I faced was they'd go back into our community, and I'm talking about my community that I work in, and they weren't finding any actionable platforms or pathways to follow this purpose. We're a very sports club orientated community. There's lots of football clubs and soccer clubs and cricket clubs and all of that. But a lot of the young people I'm working with or mentoring just aren't into the sport. They're not the sporty type. They need something creative, but they weren't finding the right platforms that were unique enough to hold their interest. So they would get bored quickly and then they'd kind of revert into this ordinary world state, which is part of the hero's journey. So Manor Academy came about by saying, all right, well, they know their purpose, but we're kind of finishing up our program. And then they're going out and going, well, I can't find anything. So what use was it? So we thought, let's create an epic after school program at our local community hub. We started off with 3 clubs, which were Dungeons and Dragons for the social aspect. We have 2 groups, a teen and a junior group of about 7 young people. And we call that our Dungeons and Dragons Adventurers League, just to make it sound cool, right? We have our Creative Writers Guild. We have Artists Alley, which started off as a manga and anime drawing group, and it evolved into Artist Alley to encompass more arts. And then late last year, we added a 4th club, and that was the Mystic Arts Society. So helping young people learn about well-being and self-care, but to make it look and sound more appealing, we've added a mystic element to it. We use divination cards, we use tarot, and we use crystals and runes and all of that cool stuff. In between that is weaved this message of how are you filling your cup and how are you avoiding emotional burnout while you're helping other people. And all of this plays into our archetypes, and that really suits our sages and our healers. They're always there for their friends, the healer. But one of the limitations is burning out emotionally because they're taking on everyone else's struggles, everyone else's pain, and they're not learning how to work it out so they can refill their cup. That's what we're providing there. That's basically it. It's inspired by the Japanese club system in Japan, and I'm probably going to butcher this word, but I think it's Bukatsudo, which is their club system. And they take it very seriously in Japan, something we don't do here. It's about extracurricular pursuits. And it's also very inspired by Greek experiential learning as well. So we were going to call it Manor Academia, which is the learning center that was outside of Athens, which was a Platonic school. And people would come and learn, and philosophy and art and sport and medicine and everything that interests them. We wanted to emulate that. And that's what makes us unique. Something else unique about it is we have a quest system, which really makes it immersive, really makes it interesting. So they're not just coming and feeling a bit lost of what to do or being told what to do like they're used to at school. They come in and they look at that quest board, and there's new quests up all the time, and they get a form of currency for completing these quests, which are built around helping them learn to overcome limitations or learning a new skill or evolving their art. And then they can use that currency to buy certain things like stationery or some little bric-a-brac, some little unique items, maybe some enamel pins, something to customize their own characters. It's been really great, and it has brought or bridged the gap between our programs and our club system by implementing a lot of systems that are in our Life RPG program into our clubs, so that people who are doing our Pathfinder program can go into our clubs and benefit from that, and people in the community who are just attending the clubs get exposed to a lot of the core themes within our mentorship, so they're still benefiting. That way we're able to increase our impact and reach more young people and basically bring out more magic in more young people more often within the context of our mission, which is always we forge heroes. That's my rant about our programs and our academy.
You're using the word magic. What does magic mean to you?
I think it's just that, just to build off what I was saying, it is discovering a purpose, discovering what brings you alive or lights a fire under you, and basically how to continue to stoke that fire within your soul, I think is modern magic. I can frame this within the context of a bit of a story of our mentorship program with those young people I mentioned in the primary school. One of the first questions the kids asked me was, what kind of magic do you do if you're a wizard? And I drew on a line from Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, and I said, well, I'm no conjurer of cheap tricks. I'm not going to pull a rabbit out of a hat or pull some scarves out of my sleeve. I said to them, I think every wizard has their own form of magic or their own idea of magic. My type of magic is helping you or the young people to bring the magic, their kind of magic, outside of themselves. I'm not going to cast any elemental spells from the end of my wizard staff or my wand or whatever I use, but if I can sort of see a little glimpse of potential within you, as we build a rapport and a connection, I can work out where you can apply that to and what's going to bring you alive. Then we start a process together of weaving magic into a tapestry of purpose and dedication and a pursuit of your own excellence. And I think that's a big thing to define, is that when we're looking for the magic in the world, when we're looking for our own magic, we have to get through the threshold guardians of our lives. We have to look past what we're being told to do or what we are told to be good at, or when we get asked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? To just think, well, I'm not grown up yet. And it's good to have a plan for the future, but just concern yourself with now, while you've still got the magic, how you're going to bring it out and where you're going to apply it. And I think then everyone's got the capability to be a wizard or a mage or a mystic or an alchemist, as I said before, transmuting experiences and transmuting your passions into something tangible that you can apply yourself to.
I want to ask you the same question that you just mentioned, that you are asking kids you are working with. So what did you want to be when you were growing up?
This is something I actually reflected on just recently when I was talking to a mentee, a student, because they asked me that same question. What did you want to be when you were a kid? And I said, well, I actually didn't have anyone in my life to ask me that question. Nobody ever asked me that question, what do you want to be when you grow up? So I never had the thought in my mind, and was actually a bit of a late bloomer, I think, because of that. So now I've got a good answer to that question. So I usually say, when I was younger, I didn't know what I wanted to be. So when I was an adult, I decided I'd become everything. Right. So, and I think that's why I use archetypes now, why I use these roles, because for every individual that I work with, I get to step into a new role and I get to become something new or someone new to that person. And the person that they need at that time is the person I need to be in that moment. So I like to say that, I definitely wouldn't have thought as a kid, if someone had asked me, what are you going to be when you're older? To say, well, I think I might be a wizard, or I think I might be a sage or a mentor. I don't even think I knew what a lot of those words meant when I was younger, except for wizard, of course. You definitely don't grow up thinking, well, maybe I'll be a wizard and then actually become one. And I think this has to do with young people these days seeing all the superhero movies around and saying, well, gee, that's impossible. So I think a lot of young people watch all these superheroes but never aspire to be one. So my job is to say, all right, well, maybe you won't be able to fly, through the sky like Superman, or run faster than light like the Flash, or swing on a web like Spider-Man. But you've got all these awesome, real superpowers inside. You just need to wake up to them. And that's your hero's journey. That's your origin story.
And what inspired you to become a mentor, to mentor young kids and help them discover themselves, their purpose?
Well, I think part of it was to do with my childhood. As I said before, I didn't have many people around me to inspire me or look out for my best interests, I guess. I came from a single parent family. I didn't have a dad around. But when I was in my 20s, I met my own mentor, and we started a friendship and a connection and our own mentorship that still lasts to this day. I think this year would be 10 years on, and he inspired me to pull my thumb out and get started with life, and definitely was a major call to adventure for myself to become a mentor. And I think that's why I took the path less traveled in my career. And instead of securing a job that would be comfortable and have security and lots of money that I could live off, I guess I'm a bit more of the wizard version of a starving artist. So I have purpose, but my financial situation is quite unstable because it's not a full-time job. I think there's find something you love doing and you'll never work a day in your life. And I feel like in my work, even though I'm constantly working behind the scenes, but yeah, definitely my mentor. And it came at a time where I was just floundering in life. I didn't have a purpose that I was aware of. And I attended a workshop, and he was there, and he was this sort of older, bald man wearing a nice suit. And I looked at him at first and I thought, oh, gee, what's this guy flinging, you know? He looks a bit like a snake oil salesman. But during that, he offered a bit of a call to action. He said, after this workshop finishes, I'll stick around for 5 minutes. And if anyone wants to chat, then this is your invitation to chat. And when it finished, most people went out, you know, rushed off, or they went outside, so they were hankering for their cigarette or whatever they wanted to do. I went to leave as well. I went, no, you know, I've had enough. And something stopped me. A little chime, you know, one of those little moments of insight. Or they call it a lightning bolt moment, a lightning bulb moment. And I stopped and I went and I chatted to him, and he turned out to be a cool guy. And we connected on social media, and I sent a message and I thought, he's probably not going to reply. And he instantly responded. We started hanging out, and I learned about mentorship then. I already knew what a mentor was. I just didn't have any around me growing up. And I started looking at the cartoons and shows and movies that I watched as a kid, and realized that mentors were all around me growing up, maybe even paving the way back then before I even knew it. Things like The Lion King with Rafiki, the crazy baboon, mentoring young Simba, and Mr. Miyagi from The Karate Kid, you know, helping Daniel LaRusso overcome bullying and learning to discipline and how to defend himself and how to think with inquiry. All these archetypes are always around us. I think my goal now these days is half of me wants to bring mentorship into the mainstream, and half of me wants to keep the mysticism around it alive. So I feel like I've blended those two things, making mentorship more available and more young people aware of the mentors in their life, but through our gamification and our visual elements and the magic we weave into it, still having an air of mystery, still being relevant to today's media as well.
And what do you think was the most impactful thing for you that your mentor did in your communication?
I hope you're ready for a story. Well, When I was younger, bit of a layabout. I dropped out of school when I was 16 years old and couch surfed and was a bit of a vagabond, I guess, within my own community. I got some really horrible tattoos on my that were kind of like almost connect the dot drawings. They're called backyard tattoos. That you don't pay the money to get a professional to do it. You just do it because it's funny in the moment, not realizing in the folly of youth that it's going to be an impactful thing for you going through life. And I had this arm here was all full of scribbles. And as you can see, and it's not magic, there's none there now, right? Also had it right there on my neck, which obviously you can't see now. So when I first met my mentor, he asked me a simple question. He said, "What is holding you back most in life right now?" I know now that the obvious answer was myself. But at that moment, I thought these horrible, horrible tattoos certainly aren't helping me. I started to notice that people would look at that the first thing when I'd apply for a job. People would look at that down the street and go, "Oh, he must be a bit of a ruffian or rebel rouser or whatever." And I found that those tattoos were kind of like a branding, and it affected my reputation. And I didn't really care about reputation back then. Now reputation, I find, is so important to thrive within your community. And he said, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" And I said, "Well, tattoos are permanent. They're there for life. That's what I've been told my whole life." And he said, "What about laser surgery to get them removed?" And I said, "I didn't even know that that was a thing because, I was a bit of an ignorant young person." So over the course of 2 years, he paid for all of my tattoo removal sessions. Not just that, but he would attend every one with me. And I think that was a really cool aspect of that mentorship. But beyond that, because I didn't drive when I was younger, there was anyone to teach me to drive, he'd pick me up and he'd drive me there and he'd sit through. And it's a very painful experience. I mean, some people deal with pain differently, and sometimes tattoos can be really painful to get. I know the one on my neck was certainly painful when I was young, but getting them removed, I think, was twice as painful. And the reason it took 2 years is because there was a couple of months between each session because the area is so heated up, it needs time to heal. So I'd go away from those sessions smelling like burnt hair and for a couple of days at least, and your whole arm is just hot. But now I don't have tattoos, and that was thanks to my mentor. But as important as that process was, I think the most impactful part of it was that he was there, that he supported me through it. And before sessions or after sessions, we would have lunch or we'd have a coffee. And on those drives, we would talk and have conversations. And that was where the mentorship would happen, not the lasering itself. But I guess you could still call it lasering because he was lasering through my limiting self-beliefs and helping me realize what was holding me back in life. And he has his own little framework. He calls that the bonsai effect. And I think this might be interesting to you. He says that we spend a lot of our early life being pruned by people and experiences in our life, like a bonsai tree. And when people prune us or situations prune us, we get tied off. Those little branches that get pruned get tied off so that we can be shaped and kept small. And then a lot of our adult life involves this debonsaiing process. So removing those ties or finding a mentor to help remove those ties so that parts of us can regrow and so that we can become, because bonsai trees are actually quite large when they're not pruned, we can become a full realized self, but we're still bent and shaped by those experiences as well, but they don't define us. So that was a really interesting concept to learn at 20 years old.
Yes, beautiful story. And I'm very curious to learn, where did your interest in this magical wizardry approach come from? Why wizards? Why hats? Why those archetypes that I know also come from fairy tales or some magical stories. Where does this all come from?
I mean, I always loved video games when I was younger. They were a real comfort to me growing up. I like to joke about it now by saying, who would have known that all those times being told that video games aren't going to benefit you in life. I can kind of look back on that and laugh now because it's all been integrated into my programs and my work. There was always wizard archetypes. There was always magicians. There was always some kind of figure in video games or movies or TV shows or cartoons that was this wise advisor to the naive protagonist who is living in their own little bubble, their own world, and kind of kicking stones until this wizard comes along or this advisor comes along and says, hey, kid, you've got potential, but you need to get out of your own way. Right. All of these figures impacted me when I was younger. As I joked before, I definitely wasn't when I wasn't reading these things, and I never, I think, said, gee, I want to be a wizard one day. I guess I kind of just fell into it. And I can't really pinpoint why exactly I chose to don the hat or don that persona. But there were certain things I realized along the way with working with the young people, and I developed it along with those young people. They had a part to play in forming this archetype of the mentor. One of those things was realizing that to break out of the ordinary world, they need to be introduced to a figure that is a bit extraordinary. And as adults, we know, right, that we can wake up in the morning and definitely feel very ordinary. Some days you can wake up with no energy. And I used to trick myself into thinking I need to be 100% to do a mentorship session until I realized that no, they don't need that, because these young people are used to seeing all the adults in their life pretend everything's perfect and that they've got it all going on. So to have a mentor to show them the reality of things, and this is another aspect of that magic we talked about before, a mentor's role is to kind of lift the veil for these young people to see through that illusion as well, that the world isn't perfect, but it's about how you approach it that matters, or what you're going to equip yourself with to deal with those challenges. So I stopped tricking myself, because that was a self-limiting belief as well, that they need to see 100%. It's healthy for young people to see that some adults in their life aren't 100% all the time, and to build a relationship or a rapport with them, they need to have that authentic connection. They need to see you transparent a lot of the times as well. They need to see that some adults do actually struggle, but they overcome those struggles, because when everything in life is going perfectly, then it doesn't make a very good gauntlet to develop your strength and your resilience. I think the quote is, smooth seas never made a skilled sailor. I think to step into that role of the mentor or the wizard or the mystic or whatever you want to choose to apply it to, there is a reality attached to it. So just to circle back to your question, what inspired me to take on this archetype? I think that's pretty much it. It's gauging with each individual, because everyone's journey is different, what kind of mentor they need, and to have the ability to shapeshift into that archetype or image that they need for that moment, but still maintain your authenticity while doing it. That's why when I said before, I didn't know what I want to be, so I decided to be everything. To master all of these archetypes that I have on offer in the Pathfinder program, and say, these are aspects of my life that I've mastered. I built this program with the archetypes that I embodied in certain aspects of my life. And so when you get the healer side of me, or you get the seeker side of me, or the trickster, the cheeky side of me, these are all aspects of myself that I've integrated within myself. So what you're seeing might be a mask, but it's a mask that I feel comfortable with wearing because I was the one that crafted it. It hasn't been crafted by anyone else.
And what books, myths, or historical influences shaped you and this mentorship approach that you are using?
Mm. So early on, it might sound like a broken record, but Gandalf made a huge impact on me. But not the only character from Lord of the Rings that had that impact. I think Aragorn or Strider from Lord of the Rings had an impact. You had the grand kind of wizard archetype there with Gandalf, and then you had Aragorn, who was a bit of a lone wolf ranger character that was a bit dark and mysterious and didn't let anyone get close to him until you get on in the story and realize who he actually is. But apart from that, I think later on in life, a book by Dan Millman, which is The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, very big impact on me. And it's a kind of a dialogue between a young college student who's named Dan Millman. So it's part true story. And he was a young college student and was lacking a bit of direction and discipline in his life and visited a gas station at 3 o'clock in the morning. And he met an old man who he started calling Socrates. And they exchange in philosophical conversations. And he learned from him, what it was to have a warrior's spirit and kind of like a peaceful heart. It's a good balance. That had an impact on me, and that really drives a lot of what I do. But yeah, as in terms of other fiction, I like Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist as well. The big message in there about finding your personal legend. That had a very big impact early on when I started my mentorship program before the Pathfinder program. It was very centered on this idea of what is your personal legend. So that had a big effect. But yeah, as I said earlier on in this conversation about them being everywhere, these references to mentorship, Lion King, Karate Kid, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, these images are everywhere. But I think we just gloss over them as kids. Or no, probably not gloss over them. We probably recognize them. But if we're lacking the same role models in our real life, then we forget about them. So we don't really retain the impact of these role models if we lack them in reality.
Thank you. And in the description of your program, you're mentioning awakening the hero within. What does that mean in a practical sense? How do you guide young people to discover their own potential? Maybe you can immerse us in that process so that we can feel how this is happening, how is it done, how does it feel to be in this process and awaken that hero within.
Well, I can only speak from the point of view of the person that's on the other side of that process, the person that's walking. And I always say that I am a passenger on your story for as long as you need me to walk beside you. And my goal is for you to not need me, to have the strength and resilience and ability and belief in yourself that you can go off into the world knowing that you've got people at your back. But to really encapsulate that process of awakening the hero and the young person, I have to refer to the hero's journey. It stems from Joseph Campbell's monomyth, where he recognized that when stories first started being told about warriors and poets and kings and magicians, that there was this common thread that made them very similar. And that starts with this idea of the ordinary world. So in terms of our program, when a parent or a guardian or someone in the community engages me for support for their young person, my first question is, what's their current life look like? And of course, I'd rather have this conversation with the young person. I do eventually, but most of it comes from the parents. So their idea of their young person's or ordinary world is very different from the young person's, as you can imagine. And that goes back to that thing of a lot of people thinking that life's pretty fine. but then they wouldn't be seeking support if it was. So it's a bit of a catch-22. The aspects of the ordinary world that I look at is, all right, well, what are their energy levels like? Pretty low, okay. What are their hobbies? Well, they don't have any. Okay, that's the red flag there. How much time do they spend on devices, or how much time do they spend isolating from their friends or from their family? Yeah, they isolate a fair bit. Okay, another red flag. You start to build this idea, this picture of what this ordinary world looks like. And then you talk to the young person and they say amazing things. And a lot of young people actually use metaphor to describe these things without knowing that they're metaphors. That's a bit of magic in itself. For example, one young person described his ordinary world as, well, I feel like life is a bit of a flat line right now and that I don't have a pulse. What a great metaphor to describe a lethargy about life. Another young person, and this was at the start of the COVID lockdowns, explained their ordinary world in an amazing way, which helped me to see these lockdowns from a different perspective. They said that before lockdown, they felt their life was like standing on a train platform and the trains that were coming into the station wouldn't stop because they were moving so fast. They didn't have enough time to hop on or even buy a ticket. When lockdown happened, the train slowed and halted and stopped at the station long enough for them to hop on, and their lives took off when lockdown finished. These metaphors are amazing, but sometimes it might come from a dream. It might be a vision, or they just see it as a dream or a nightmare. But how I see it, just from experience and from spending a lot of time researching dream interpretation and symbology and metaphor, knowing that life throws ping pong balls before it throws bowling balls. So we need to get the smaller messages before they become more painful. And our dreams are a way of making sense of our world that our reality simply can't comprehend or provide. So when a young person goes, oh, I had this dream that I was driving a car from the back seat and I couldn't control it properly. And I say, well, I've had similar dreams like that when I was younger. I see that as you feeling like nothing in your life is in your control, that it's like an out of control car that's about to crash. How does your dream end most of those times? I wake up just before I crash. So these metaphors come fast and thick. The next stage after that ordinary world is about being a bit more aware of a call to adventure, which is really a call to action. This is the stage where we've recognized what your ordinary world looks like. Has there been anything or any event or calling in your life that's made you contemplate making any changes? Getting out of your because the ordinary world is a comfort zone, even if it's discomforting. And I make the joke to a lot of parents. I say, my first job is to make your young person feel very uncomfortable in their comfort zone. And we have a laugh about it. And I don't know if they think I'm serious. I'm very serious. You got to get them uncomfortable with their comfort zone, because outside of your comfort zones is where life happens. So this call to adventure can come from so many different directions. It can come from some clarion call from the heavens or from some dream, some divine message, like we see in a lot of media where they pull the sword from the stone or something like this. But it can also come from a place of loss as well. You can reach a very severe state of depression or existential crisis before that call to adventure comes. Sometimes you have to be brought so low and be knocked onto your back in order to see the stars. Do you know what I mean? There's another metaphor there. It can come from places of great inspiration. It can come from places of great loss and grief. Grief for the part of you that needs to kind of die for the rest of you to wake up. But once you get that call to adventure, there's the refusal of the call. Change is scary. Getting out of our comfort zones of our known world is scary. So a lot of young people without the proper guidance see that what's ahead of them. They're standing on the precipice of the cliff looking down into the clouds and not having the courage to jump. I think it was Joseph Campbell himself that said about a young Native American boy facing his rite of initiation, standing on the precipice of this cliff to take that leap of faith because the chasm is not as deep or as wide as you might think. It's just obscured by the clouds. I see the role of the mentor in our society, and this is what I say to all the mentors I train. Our role in this community or this society, this world, is to help them cross from that ordinary world into the extraordinary world by shining a light in those clouds, in that fog, in that darkness, and saying, hey, it's okay, I'll make the leap with you. And I think that's the big thing. Sometimes they just need someone to leap with them or someone to walk beside them so that they don't repeat that savage cycle, which is ordinary world, call to adventure, refusal, and it goes in a loop like a snake eating its own tail. The mentor's role is to help them step over that threshold, to overcome limiting beliefs, limiting environments, limiting people in their life. I'm not afraid to say this these days, but a lot of young people, the threshold guardian, which is the thing that stops them from the thing they've got to defeat to step out of the ordinary world, is sometimes their family, sometimes the people that are closest to them who don't want to let go of those comfort zones either. They're the people that have built the comfort zones around them their whole childhood. They've defined them. They've been doing that bonsai process of pruning and tying off to keep them in the shape that they want them to. So some young people have to deal with that. Some people will have to deal with their parents or their old friendship circles that are no longer serving a beneficial effect in their lives. Once they're across that threshold, you see it on their faces. You see it in their demeanour. Suddenly they walk a bit more straight up. They walk with a bit more of a stride. They learn that the metaphors that they've been playing over in their head actually have meaning, and they get out of that, I guess, that Plato's cave environment, and they see the world, okay, well, it's not just shadows being cast on a wall by the people in my life. There's so much more of the world outside. It's kind of like if you sleep in a room with blockout curtains, that block out all of the sun, and you wake up and you think it's the middle of the night. You crack open the blind and realize that it's the full bloom of the morning and the sun blinds you. It's kind of like that. It's a bit of a blinding if you leave a cave or you leave a dark space, you stay in there for too long and you come out and you're a bit blinded for a second until your eyes readjust and the corners of your vision start to clear up. That's like what it's like to wake up to what you've been living in, that ordinary world you've been living in. So then after that, it's once that's out of the way, you start to realize, okay, well, now I've got the opportunity to focus on my abilities, focus on finding new allies that benefit me, defeating more of those dragons. And there's another quote by Campbell's, the cave you fear to enter holds the gift or the dragon you need to slay or whatever it is. And I think the world that we live in now, it's the time of dragons, and so therefore we need the time of heroes. And I always say the journey that the hero gets is the one that they're ready for. And that's a direct quote from Joseph Campbell himself.
Yes, and I have a question that directly ties to what you just said. What challenges do you think young people face today that knights, warriors, and seekers of the past had also faced?
I think apathy is one of these massive dragons in our lives. I think a lot of that has to do with the media of the time, social media, of course, not to sound like a boomer or anything, that, to blame social media for everything, but it has a large impact. I think everyone is comparing themselves with others. And I think that is a bit of a savage cycle in itself, comparing their fashion, comparing their looks, their life and their purpose and what they have going on. If that person's achieving something amazing, or why should I bother? People not seeing the work that goes behind all of that. The same thing as what I said before. everyone just posts their perfect life on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. So that's what everyone sees. They don't see the uphill climb that it took to get to that point. I talk about heroes and I talk about all these powers and stuff we have, but I'm not a big fan of all of these superhero movies that have really, really, really become oversaturated over the last 15 years or so. I think that when we have too much of this example that you need to have some divine thing happen to you for you to become a superhero. And you look at the origin stories of a lot of these superheroes, and some of their lives are pretty crappy before they get their powers. And it's like, oh, now that I have my power, now I'm great. We need to realize that we can become great before we notice our powers. I think what the media does is it creates a bit of a lightning in a bottle. Do you know what I mean by that? And I think that with these movies, it's kind of like a storm that it's all thunder, all noise, all lights and action and glamour, but no actual lightning. Everyone's waiting for that lightning bolt to hit them on the top of the head to get inspiration. But all they're hearing is thunder. It's all just the rumbling in the clouds and no actual inspiration or strike. It's a big loop that they go through that, oh, hang on, okay, well, now there's another superhero movie. Now I want to be that person. Now there's another superhero movie. Now I see myself in that person. And I think it makes voyeurs out of our young people. Between that and YouTubers and content creators that are online that create a perfect world, they say, oh, well, I can play games and make millions of dollars by playing games. I think it creates a false sense of reality for a lot of young people. People who would rather watch than do or become themselves. And I think that's a big problem. I think that is a big cause of the apathy and lethargy that our young people are facing. But I think one of the other big things is that a lot of young people are reaching out for leaders in their community and they're not finding any. I only speak for where I live, the state I live in, or the communities that I live in. That's what's happening. They kind of reach this point where they go, oh, I need some inspiration, or I need a positive role model. And they reach out and they only find pale imitations. And that's usually people in gangs that are going to take advantage of them, which is why I think we're really missing mentorship. We're really missing proper rites of passage initiations within our society and with our communities.
In terms of that, in your program, you are teaching virtues like chivalry, honor, resilience. Why do you think that these ancient values are still important today?
Yeah, of course. I think they're important. I'm just going to pull up my own little copy of my Pathfinder program here to go through these virtues that I've sort of deemed important, which we go through in our programs. And there's 8 of them that I've sort of looked at and went, I think these are pretty important. And the way we do this in our program is here. This is how they keep track of their progress in our program. There's lots of different aspects on there, but what we do is we go through these virtues and I ask them how important this virtue or this value is to them for themselves and how important it is for them to see in others or in the world. And we shade 1 being not very important, 2 being semi-important, and 3 being important to them. So these virtues are courage, and we go through them all. We go, what does courage mean to you? Justice, and the facing of injustice and how that we feel about that. Integrity, authenticity, of course, the big one. Compassion for ourselves, compassion for others. Adaptability, what's being thrown at us and how can we, like the bamboo stick, it gets hit by a heavy storm and it bends with the wind, but then when that storm passes, it sort of springs back up into shape. Empowerment, and that's just as much important about empowering others, but more about empowering ourselves. Because if we can't empower ourselves, how on earth can we empower other people? And autonomy, which is a bit of a strange one to put in virtues, but I feel like the ability to be a part of a pack or a part of a group. But once that group is gone, how do you feel within yourself when your role isn't dictated by the group that you exist in? So being able to be alone, but be okay with it, knowing that you're not always going to be alone. A lot of the young people I work with, they choose the lone wolf archetype. It's one of the most popular archetypes. And the lone wolf is classically, like as I said before, Aragorn at the start of Lord of the Rings. They don't need anyone. They're a bit dark and mysterious, and they thrive off that. But with young people, they attach their identity to these groups that they're a part of, that when they're not invited to something or that group dissolves or falls apart or there's conflict, then their whole identity is smashed to pieces and they catastrophize it and they get existential and they go, nobody likes me, everyone hates me, I'm alone. With that becomes the depression, comes the existential crisis and social anxiety. So we ask the question, how important is autonomy to you to be able to isolate? That's something us mentors learn. And as we learn as adults, I think, there's that very clinical term now, which is FOMO, which is a real thing now that can be sort of clinically looked at, is the fear of missing out. And I think that's come about from social media too. I always joke with the young people and they hate it because it's kind of like a dad joke to them. I say, I've got JOMO, and they go, what the hell's JOMO? And I say, it's the joy of missing out. I like not being invited to things. I like not having visitors to them. And I always joke with them that they go, well, isn't that a comfort zone? And I say, it is, but at my age, I've earned it. You got to be young. You got to get out of your comfort zone to realize how to be in a comfort zone, but how you can make it healthy, going from the unhealthy comfort zone to the healthy one. I say, I've earned it now. I've earned my comfort zone. Those are our core virtues. Depending on how you feel about virtues or what's important to you, there can be hundreds of different virtues that you could apply. These are just the 8 that we focus on. And I don't know why 8's become a bit of a magical number for me. But within my program, we've got 8 archetypes, 8 virtues, 8 life domains that we put our time and energy into. The reason we focus on virtues is because, well, nobody really knows what their virtues are or what their values are these days, what their morals are. I feel like all of these things are dictated by the crowd or dictated by society, what you can care about, when you can care about it. But it's about looking into the core of yourself and saying, this is what I care about. And it kind of acts like a compass for them. It's a bit of a moral compass.
Yes, I think those are definitely very important. Like we just discovered that they're as important now as they were, hundreds of years ago. Basically, nothing changed, and knowing those values really makes a difference in people's lives and especially in kids' lives.
Indeed.
You already mentioned today archetypes, and you are using this role-playing approach. So how does this live RPG mentorship work? How do you use role-playing and adventure-based learning to help young people?
Yes, I do mention archetypes, and at this point, your listeners are probably thinking, you keep mentioning it, but what the hell does it mean? What are archetypes? I always explain archetypes as universal templates that we see in ourselves and that we can align to. When I'm guiding young people through choosing an archetype, I always say, don't focus purely on the imagery of it and how cool it looks. Read the descriptions and read through the different aspects, because every archetype has its own story. It has its own narrative or its own lore. It has its own skills and strengths and its own challenges, limitations, virtues, and focus. Focus more on that. And I usually say to older kids, they're allowed to choose 2. I actually had a young person the other day choose 4 because he was very intelligent and neurodiverse. And really compartmentalized everything. And I said, that's the first time that's ever happened, a young person choosing 4 archetypes. And he got it straight away. Usually young people don't pick up on this, but the whole point of that is to realize as we get older that each day, each week, something's going to require us to draw on all of these archetypes. And we're not just stuck in one. There's aspects of all of them. And he said, and it was really funny because we're in a public library and he was explaining that. And he said, he's only 13, by the way. He said, well, I feel like there's a part of all of these archetypes within everyone. We just don't know it yet. And this older lady was, oh, hello, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I've been a teacher for 25 years and I've never heard a young person express themselves like that or be aware like that. And then the kids started to sell my program to her and I said, I don't need to sell anything to you, do I? He said, oh, these are archetypes. This is the Pathfinder program. She's very interested. But yeah, just funny that he chose the lonely rebel, which is the lone wolf and the rebel. And his secondary archetype was the creative trickster, or I think he called himself the creative clown, which is the creator archetype and the trickster archetype, realizing that he's creative, but he's also a bit cheeky, So yeah, as I said, they've all got their own aspects to them, and they're kind of like a universal heroic template for these young people. And when they pick multiple, I say, pick one that you feel like you align to or that feels like you right now, and maybe pick one that you're aspiring to bring more of into your life. And that makes sense to them. They say, okay, yeah, well, I am this way right now, but there's aspects of one of these archetypes that I want to bring more of into my life. They might be a healer, but they focus so much energy on absorbing other people's emotion, that empathetic ability, but they burn out. So then they go, all right, well, maybe my second archetype can be the warrior because I need to develop resilience and learn ways to protect myself and others in ways that can benefit and sort of synergize the two of those archetypes together, making one even stronger archetype. So yeah, that's the best way I can explain archetypes, really, just at a base level, is they're just templates and all of them exist within us. It's just about waking them up. So that's what we always say. We're saying we're awakening the potential that's slumbering inside of every young person on our planet.
And everyone becomes a hero of their own journey. This is, I think, what I really admire about your program. And we talked a bit before with you about that. And today you mentioned that we often see somebody and look at them as hero and think, oh, we don't have this. But every book, I think, can be looked at from a position of different character within. Aragon, of course, it's written from one perspective, but we can write it from the perspective of Aragon. Yes? So he can be a main hero if we look at all his journey, that it wasn't focused on him, this particular book, but we can have the separate book about him. We can have a separate book about Gandalf and all he went through. I think the author just didn't have time to write all those books about each of them, but the book can be written. And everyone has their unique, absolutely amazing journey. And I think this is what you are trying to do, to explain and to make kids feel that they're heroes of their own journeys.
That's exactly it. And that's the main thing. And I usually always say that although as a kid, a lot of us have probably been told the world or the universe doesn't revolve around you, right? When you're throwing a tantrum or you're wanting something, I know I got told a lot as a kid, oh, the universe doesn't revolve around you, And I say, well, that's true partly. The universe doesn't revolve around you, but your world certainly does. Your world revolves around you. We forget that we're the main character and the director and the narrator of our life, but there are going to be situations and encounters and people that are going to make you feel like you're a side character in your own life. And I think that is one of the big problems we face is young people forget, and adults as well, probably more so with adults, but we forget that we are the protagonist of our own story, so that we might have plenty of side characters pop up along the way, but we're the one that is directing the narrative, and we need to never forget that. And when we do forget that, that's when we get knocked off course and we lose control of our own life. We lose control of our purpose. We lose control of our autonomy as well. And that's when you get existential. That's when you get lost in the darkness. You question, who am I? What is my role? Where am I going? I think it all stems from exactly that, and forgetting we are the protagonist of our stories.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I think it's so important. Who is your favorite character in Lord of the Rings?
I got to say Gandalf.
Gandalf, yes.
It's Gandalf every time. Gandalf. But not just for being the wizard that he is at the start of the movie, the wizard that he becomes as well. He goes through a death and a rebirth. He dies as Gandalf the Grey and comes back as Gandalf the White. When he's Gandalf the Grey, he's a bit more relaxed. He's a bit more jovial, and he's joking around, and he's maybe a little bit grumpy here and there. But when he dies and he comes back to life after sacrificing himself, he's been given all these new powers, because in the Lord of the Rings mythos, when these wizards, these Istari, when they die, they go back up to basically their version of heaven. And he was given a new role, and he was sent back down to Middle Earth as Gandalf the White, and he comes back a lot more wiser. He comes back a lot more serious because he has a mission to accomplish. And I think that's a great little inclination of the process of life and the hero's journey too, that it's a constant cycle of death and rebirth. And I think a lot of people get mistaken, and to raise a bit of a serious topic here about suicide and suicidal ideation, which is a lot of people get confused between all of them having to die rather than the parts of themselves that need to die off so that new parts can grow. And I think when people don't have someone to explain it to them like that, and they have this suicidal ideation or this existential crisis or depression that leads to that, is to have someone to help support them through this process of dying to be reborn, and not just sort of dying and that's it. Because then you rob yourself of the great things that can possibly come. And I know that I'm sort of generalizing a very serious topic, but that's just how I see it. I feel like so many people haven't had the support or the nurturing environment to help them go through that process of integrating the pain and their traumas and the things that have happened to them in life. So, of course, the natural process of that is for people to get very disconnected with themselves, disconnected with life, where they bring themselves to that point of suicide or ending their life. And if only we all had someone to say to us, whether it's a full-time mentor or, something I call a sidewalk sage, which is these guidepost mentors that you meet down the street or on the bus or in the wild. They say something wise to you and you don't realize it until a crisis arises in your life and you go, geez, I remember when that strange man with the wizard hat with a feather in it said that really wise thing to me, and it kind of becomes a bit of a light in the darkness then. My on earth, if I could have any wish in the world, would be for everyone to have some kind of guide or mentor in their life that they can go to when they're feeling these feelings. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so important. I absolutely agree with you. And what transformations have you seen in people who go through your mentorship program?
I see all sorts of stuff. I guess it's linked to everyone being so unique and everyone being on their own journey and seeing where they take it. Something interesting to know about mentorship is it's not an overnight fix. It's not panacea either. It's not a band-aid on the issue either. It's still a process. And this process of mentorship and these lessons that are learned can manifest within a single moment. They might come a year later. They might come 5 years later when something happens, and then is that time to draw on those lessons that they learn. Sometimes I lose track of mentees, and then they pop up a couple of years down the track, and I say, "How's life doing?" And they say, "Oh, life's great. Our mentorship really switched something on for me. You see something." And some mentees I see a while after we've completed our mentorship, I feel like mentorship is a bit open-ended, or my style of mentorship. We just pick up where we left off, and things have happened in both of our lives, and you just come back together and you go, all right, what's been happening in between chapters since we parted ways? And then we go from there. Our mentorship finished 2 years ago, and I haven't really done anything, but I know that I want to. That's a good starting point again. It can happen. I can go, what did you do in the last year since we saw each other last? Oh, I completed school, and now I'm in uni. I never wanted to go to uni before, but now I am. I've got a vision ahead of me. See another mentee, same age. I haven't done anything in the last year. All right, well, let's pick up where we left off and let's step back on track. That's just it. Sometimes people have just stepped off the path in their life. And once they step off that path, they're kind of like left to walk in the wilderness, or they plateau and they're lost in that plateau, or they're halfway up the mountain and scared to go any higher, or they've run out of air and then just need that Sherpa to come along and say, I'll guide you the rest of the way, or this leg of the journey. So it's a very funny thing, mentorship. And I think that's why I haven't had too much luck in schools, because all they really want to know is, how is it going to benefit their literacy? How is it going to benefit their maths? How is it going to benefit their behaviour in the classroom? And I have to say, I could lie and say, well, it's going to benefit this way, and here's statistics, and here's this data and all of this. But I can't quantify what I do in data, because I think it's unquantifiable, if that's a real word. Because it's based on the human experience. It's based on what they learn in that process and where they take it, not where they're not given a report at the end that has graded how well they've done on it. We say, well, how do you feel about the process? I feel okay about it. Great. What was your biggest takeaway? Which is what I say to kids at the end of each session. And they say, what the hell does that mean? They try and come up with the answer that they think I want to hear. And I stop them and I say, this is you. This is your reflection. This is your journey. I just want to know what you've learned and how you're going to use it. And they go, and they relax and they go, okay. I said, none of this is a test. You're not being graded. It's not being reported on. There's not a monthly or term report being sent to your parents about how well you're doing. You need to realize this in yourself. How are you doing? And they relax and they go, okay, well, I don't know just yet. Maybe my reflection's going to come tomorrow, or maybe it'll come in a dream. And I say, that's good enough. And you know where to reach me. Let me know how you're going. Okay. And they know that they can reach me. Whereas most of the young people I work with have come from a mainstream service. And this is why I created Money Youth Project to begin with all those years ago. Because I was having a lot of parents come to me and say, well, we go and see a psychologist, or we go and see a psychiatrist. And they build a rapport with this person over the course of 6 months or a year or whatever. And then they go back to them and the person's gone. They've been retained, or they've moved on or changed organisation. And the young people are left with their case notes. Well, they've given you case notes to someone new. Now you've got to start the whole process over again. And we had a lot of young people being honest with us and saying, we're sick of repeating our story over and over again. So they just start making stuff up. They let these psychologists know what they think they want to hear. But then that creates a disruptive narrative as well. Then they're not being authentic. So, and it's not me bemoaning these other services. I'm becoming a psychotherapist myself. But I see mentorship as a bit of a buffer for these services. So I'm going to keep it real, especially when young people might have to wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks for an appointment. We try and remain flexible, and I keep I hate using the word client, but I'll use it here for a better term, lack of a better term. I keep my client base low. I cap myself at 10 mentees at a time. I never reach that capacity. It just helps me be able to remain customizable. I don't have a caseload of 30 young people. I get to really focus on these young people and say, I don't take notes. I don't keep case files myself. I committed myself to remembering all the young people's names, remembering all their families' names, their friends' names, what they want to do in their life, what their story has been leading up to this time. It's all kept up here. I think that's a bit of a magical ability, to be honest. And I forced myself to do that when I first got into this field. I said, I don't want to be the psychologist that sits there and takes notes while they're talking about something really critical in their life, because I know young people hate that. But I understand that process and why that needs to happen in some cases, because there's very serious issues and traumas that need to be kept on record. But that's not my style. I feel like a lot of young people are sick of retreading the same stories, and a lot of them just want to take it and move on in their life. And that's what we're about. We're in the present. Where are we going to take that into the future? That's what we're concerned about.
And you mentioned today gamification of the program. I remember last time we met, we discussed a little bit a benefit of it and the possibility to look at life more as a quest rather than to take it too seriously, because I think sometimes we're prone to do that, especially when you are growing up. Everything seems to be so acute, so tragic. Everyone who said something, just a different word that you would expect, that's the end of the world. Yes. Somebody looked at you in a different way, that's it. And if somebody critiqued you, that's the end of life at all. So can you explain how your approach maybe shifts a little bit this perception of world being so tragic?
As you asked that question, I realized that I went off on a bit of a tangent. And from your last question about the definition of this life RPG and gamification and stuff, and I guess this question kind of highlights that as well. And the reason we chose to gamify our programs and create this kind of quest-based framework is because once we get to the end of the Pathfinder program, the last session is about planning a quest or a mission with your mentor. Basically, what we're doing is we're teaching them how to, one, take everything they've learned about themselves and what their passions are, but how to apply it to their life, how to follow that purpose. And the more we do it, the more we're able to engage in life. The reason we decided to gamify that, first I'll start with a bit of a definition of this gamification, which is taking the things that intrigue and immerse and interest young people about video games, but applying it to real life functionality or real life integration. It's basically just a way to help them separate the counselling from this looking at life as a quest, having a mentor. And when I say role-playing, there are situations where you might role-play situations or scenarios just to emphasise what we've been talking about, but mostly that role-playing defines that your character, that you are as a person, is the most important character that you'll ever create. We can go off and create characters in games. We can create characters in our art and in our stories. But the character that we are becoming is the most important character we will develop ever until you become a parent. You're helping that young person then develop their own character, but remembering, this is the funny thing about being a mentor. I'm all about empowering young people to sort of go out of the status quo and form themselves. But then when I became a parent, I'm like doing a lot of things that I'm like, all right, well, you still need to maintain some kind of control, or it'll just be chaos. I find that if we look at our life and our chores and our tasks that we need to do as quests, then they suddenly they don't sound as scary, or they don't sound as mundane. So even I worked with a young person who was a school refuser, who didn't want to go to school. There was some really real reasons why they didn't want to go to school. There was bullying, and they didn't think they were neurodiverse. They didn't find the content in school to be engaging. But we started to frame it as a quest, and we made the map of the school into like a fantasy map. Where are the dragons? Where are the goblins? Where are the trolls? Which are the monsters? The enemies? Where do they usually hang out? Put them on this part of the map. Where is a safe haven or a save point or a checkpoint? The library, these safe spaces, the well-being area. Okay, this is fun. I've got a map, but it's in my own style and it's in a sort of fantasy looking way. The same way we do the rest of our program. Archetypes is like, there's very deep connotations to archetypes. It comes from Carl Jung and his archetypal kind of form of psychology. But they're displayed like a video game manual, like a character selection screen on a video game. So they see this and they go, well, this is like picking a character. All right, let's look at your virtues. What are they like? Well, some role-playing games have stats. All right, so your virtues are like stats. How do you level those stats up? How would you level your virtues up? Well, the more you use them, the better you get at them. Fantastic. That's exactly right. You get the picture now. The way it's all recorded as well, it's like having your own character profile. They don't have a report card, but they've got somewhere in their book, their Pathfinder field manual, which every young person gets in our program, where they can go back after each session and fill it in, and they see how they're leveling up and storing the information of their character that they can go back and reference. When we look at the social side of things, our bond links, it's a sociogram, really. We're looking at inner circle, who benefit us, who's in our outer circle, kind of like guidepost mentors, people that we can still learn from even if we don't have direct contact with them. And, we've got our outer circle, which is usually where bullies and detrimental people are existing. And then we say, oh, now that you've recognized and unlocked your own archetypes and their skills and abilities and limitations, start applying that to the people in your life. Recognize their archetypes or how you see them as their archetypes. How can you leverage their skills? If you're working on a project or if you're encountering a situation in life, forming a party, which is a big theme in role-playing games, you form a party of the people that supplement your own strengths and help overcome your own challenges. I used that example of the healer and the warrior earlier, but say you're a lone wolf, but you want to involve yourself in more social groups. Maybe you team up with your trickster friend who's a bit funnier and a bit more social, or maybe you team up with the seeker who's a bit more about getting out of comfort zones and finding adventure. You'd team up with these people and that would immerse you and help you transition more into a social environment. And they start to see all these aspects. They go, okay, well, yeah, it really is like being in a video game. And then, as I mentioned before, then that process becomes looking at life as a quest. And the first thing of doing that is when you finish your mentorship, you go on a quest with your mentor, taking everything you've learned about yourself and channeling it and going out into your community and applying it into one of your interests. And as I said before, that's why we created the Manor Academy, because if they don't exactly know what they want to do in their community or their community doesn't offer it, they can come to the academy and find a bit of a purpose there or have a platform to socialize or a platform to create, basically equipping them with the ability to say, this is something that I need to do, or this is a challenge that I need to overcome. If I look at it as a quest where I can apply my character and use all these superpowers or these skills or strengths, and then having that sense of achievement from completing it, it is like you're leveling up in life. Your strengths become stronger. Your challenges become less challenging. Your virtues become more potent, And then at the end of this program, they've got this character sheet that they can look back on every time in their life. So when they're feeling a bit lost, they can go, all right, well, I know that I went through this program and I'm reminded, and they can see how things are different now to how they used to be. Then they can go on a different adventure, or they can go off on their own and start their own adventure, or Some of the people I've worked with become youth workers themselves. So then they get to use what they've learned in our program to help them in a different way that they're not going to learn in their course or anything like that. It's a very complex system, but once they get their head around it, they realize that they've been doing this in video games since they were kids, and the separation between that and real life, but how they can both sort of work within each other. It's a pretty magical thing to watch.
Yes, and I think also there is a different outlook at so-called enemies. They're not enemies anymore. It's just essential part of each quest. There will be somebody who will be against you or doing something, but without it, there wouldn't be a quest even.
If we see it as adversaries,
adversaries.
We get to see that this can be applied to people. It can be applied to situations or environments that are challenging us.
And can you share with our listeners how they can find information about your program, how they can connect with you?
You can find us on our website, which is www.manayouthproject.com, which is MANA, Youth Project. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram under the same name. You can find us also on YouTube. We don't have a huge YouTube channel or anything. It's sort of just getting started. But there's a couple of videos on there that I've created in a very media-centric, gamified way that explains some of the core aspects of our program that you might find interesting. They've got some cool graphics on there and some voices. It's like characters explaining tutorials to you, but they're explaining the core systems. That was an exciting thing to create. And our programs, you can have them in person. Obviously, you have to be where I am or in the same sort of town or suburb that I'm in to take place in face-to-face mentorship. But all of this can be translated online. It can be done through Zoom. It can be done through our course materials, which can all be digital and fillable. It can be done individually. The Pathfinder program can be done in groups, really directing it towards schools and homeschooling groups as well. And that's a big focus that we're wanting to go into this year, is to really spread our impact, not just with our Pathfinder program, but with mentorship in general, as we train more mentors and try and engage with communities across the world. Our main mission now is to develop these programs and rites of passage for small communities in other countries so that we're able to travel and train up mentors so that they can begin forging heroes in their own area as well.
That's amazing. And I would like to finish our podcast today with the advice that you are giving your mentees, how to start your day with the magic. I think that's such a wonderful advice. It's working for me. I remember what you said when we last time met, and it just makes the world of difference to me. So can you share it?
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about there, and then that's eat breakfast. Start your day with a good breakfast. And I always say that when you start your day with a good breakfast, you've got a few benefits there. You have done something for yourself, and this goes for young people and adult listeners. You've done something for yourself at the beginning of the day, and no matter what happens in your day, no matter what adversaries rise to block your path or challenge you, you can always go back and say, no one can take that from me. I took the time in the morning. I had a good breakfast. I filled my stomach, and I've always got that. But I think there's a bigger message in that too. And that is, besides breakfast, the magic of just doing something for yourself. We live in a world that is in the power of yes. We're all obsessed with this power of yes. Say yes to everything. But I think it promotes a lot of burnout and expectation. I offer a different way. I think we need to start relearning the power of no. I sometimes have no days. I put my phone on silent. I say I'm not working. Nobody have any expectations of me. I'm going to go spend some time in nature. I'm going to go hiking. I'm going to go have a little picnic for myself. If you can do that on a regular basis, I think it won't take long until you start to see that magic is all around us. and that we try so hard looking for it outside of ourselves that we miss it because there's so many things going on in life. And once we start to realize that everything comes from within us, that's how you reclaim your magic.
Yes.
And that's it.
Yes, and then you are ready for your quest for the day already after that initial breakfast. And like we discussed with you before, that many fantasy fiction book characters, they do it. On their quest, they have great food. And you gave an example from A Lord of the Rings. They had a feast before they went on their quest. I think that's very important. Thank you for this advice. Thank you for this wonderful, wonderful interview, all the insights you provided.
Thank you.
So truly appreciate it. Thank you.
It's been an honor, and I appreciate you.
Dear listeners, I hope you found our Magical Professions podcast episode insightful. As we concluded, I'd like to extend a heartfelt invitation to all of you. Your stories, encounters, and knowledge are invaluable to us, and we want you to be a part of this mystical journey. Have you ever had a brush with a magical profession, a strange encounter, or stumbled upon hidden knowledge? Do you possess ancient scrolls, widespread tales, or first hand experiences that you believe belong in the spotlight? Are you aware of a sci fi or fantasy book or a movie with magical professionals in it? We want to hear from you. At Magical Professions, we cherish the power of collective wisdom and the magic of shared experiences. So don't be shy. Reach out to us with your stories, sources, or any information about magical professions you would like to share. You can connect with us via email at magicalprofessions@gmail.com or through our social media channels. Your contribution could become the heart of a future episode, and together we'll weave an even richer tapestry of wonder. Thank you for joining us on this mystical journey. Remember, the magic is not just in the stories we tell, but in the connections we make. Until next time, keep the magic alive, and may your world be ever more enchanting. I can't wait to hear from you.